Hello, everybody. And I think, can you hear me? Okay, we have a delayed audio, and I believe part of that is because Oz is doing the stuff from his phone in a restaurant instead of his studio. And so it's delayed, and I'm going to send him a text and see if he can fix that real quick. And if you can hold on with me. Sorry about this. This has just been an interesting day. This whole show is going to be very interesting because just a minute. I'm sorry. I can't even walk and chew gum. Anyway, the delay, part of the delay is because we'll get it right. Just be patient, please. And I am so challenged in all this technology stuff. And I am so challenged in all this technology stuff. So I am so challenged in all this technology stuff. So I am so I'm not. So somebody, I finally got to the live chat. Are there must be delays in my earbuds, but not really to you guys. Somebody send me a message out there in chat land and tell me. In my earbuds, but not really to you guys. Somebody send me a message out there in chat land and tell me. My earbuds, but not really to you guys. Somebody send me a message out there. All right, I sent. Chat land and tell me. I sent a chat. This is hysterical. This is hysterical. I don't know what window I have open that it's causing problems, guys. From this end, I'm sorry. I don't know what window I have open that it's causing problems, guys. From this end, I'm sorry. I don't know what window I have open that it's causing problems, guys. From this end, I'm sorry. Please look at your tab and mute the YouTube tab. Okay. I'm sorry. Please look at your tab and mute the YouTube tab. Let's see. Please look at your tab and mute the YouTube tab. Did that fix it? Let's see. Please look at your tab and mute the YouTube tab. Did that fix it? Let's see. All right. Did that fix it? Let's see. All right. All right. That's what you get for having technologically challenged grandma here. That's what you get for having technologically challenged grandma here. And I don't know how to technologically challenged grandma here. And I don't know how to. All right, is that better? I muted it there. I tried to mute it on my phone. If I don't have my phone on, I can't see the words in the live chat. So, hey, I'm so sorry. This is just crazy. All right. Anyway, if it's better, hey, we're just going to wing it tonight. This whole thing is a wing it. Actually, right now, Oz is eating wings. With my brother-in-law. He's eating wings with my brother-in-law at BW3's. Sunny got an emergency at work, so she had to cancel at the very last minute. And so it's just me. And I don't even know. Do I look at my laptop? Do I look at my phone? You guys, help. Anyway, but it should be fun. So we decided if I can find a way to read your questions, I will answer them. You can ask me anything. And if you choose not to ask me anything, then we'll just have a short show. I was trying to rack my brain of a couple things to talk about to just get us going. And yesterday, actually, I started making a list of some of the things that I questioned throughout my Christian years that never got answers to, and that eventually helped lead into my deconversion. And so I'll start with that. And if you have a question, I'll try, guys. I'll try so hard. I'm trying to do this. Believe it or not, I finally learned how to do a PowerPoint. I mean, that's huge for me. So, this is challenging stuff. Anyway. One of the things I noticed very early on in my Christian walk was, I was 16 years old when I was saved, and immediately got into Bible studies and was involved in a charismatic type church. And of course, all the Bible studies were taught from materials that were approved, and questions and answers of things that were outside of what was being taught weren't really encouraged. But I started really seeing immediately that there was a difference between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament. And I wondered at that. And over the years, I did this Christianity thing for 52 years. And never did I get an answer that satisfied me as far as why there was such a difference in character between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament, who was displayed through Christ. That was number one. The second thing that really got me to questioning was in the 10 Commandments, the first one. The first commandment saying, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And I thought, well, if you're the only God there is, why is that commandment even necessary? And I really didn't question that beyond what my mind would comprehend at the time, just that it just didn't settle right, and it didn't seem right. That why in the world should he have to give a commandment to not worship another God if he was the only God? So that was another thing that kind of hung out in my brain. The list that I wrote is not specific to Old Testament first and then New Testament, Old and New in order. But one of the early things was, where in the world did Cain's wife come from? You know, I heard versions stated that, well, Cain's wife was actually a daughter of Adam and Eve. And I thought, well, so you're telling me that God is okay with incest? Or if there was supposedly this whole city and he went away to this whole city, then where did all these people come from? And of course, it was never answered. It was never given any information of, you know, study this out beyond looking at scripture or using a lot of excuses or made up stuff of what the preacher thought or what, you know, somebody else in the study group thought. So that was another thing of why there's so many whys, really. As I look back and think, there were very many whys in my Christianity journey, but there was never anyone who really answered them to my satisfaction, I guess is what I'm looking for. Why was the biblical way the only way? I mean, you guys have heard talks. I've heard talks all over the place about all the different religions, and if we're born in another country, we would have a different religion. And if Christians were ordered by the gospel to go and share the gospel around the world, and it's been 2,000 years, then we're doing a piss poor job of sharing the gospel. If by this time in 2,000 years we haven't managed to have more people saved than there are. There was something interesting today, and I was looking at Timothy, 2 Timothy 2:8. No, I'm not in a Bible study. I was just looking up something that was on my mind and another thing of figuring it out. And it was a verse that, of course, Paul said it, and talking to Timothy, and he said specifically that this is not, or this is part of my gospel. I've got to read this to you. So, yeah, we're going to have a Bible study. Let's see. Because after all the years that I've studied, I never saw this before. 2 Timothy 2:8. Paul's telling Timothy, remember Jesus Christ, risen from the dead, descendant of David, according to my gospel. And that's Paul speaking. And so I looked it up in the scriptures, and I mean, not the scriptures. I got out the concordance and another book that I have to use for helping to understand the Greek. And it was the word meaning my, as in Paul saying, this is my gospel. And I thought, isn't that interesting? I mean, I've heard talk so much on the different programming I listen to now on YouTube about the Pauline version of Christianity, which really it is. And when I saw that today, I thought, well, daggone it, even Paul said it right there himself out of his own mouth, that this is my gospel. He didn't call, even speaking about Christ, he's calling it my gospel. And I thought, well, that's really kind of interesting. And knowing that I don't believe that the gospel is the word of God as I was taught for 52 years. And I do know that in the churches that I was a part of, both as a pastor's wife and before that time and after that time, that majority of the sermons were preached from the Pauline epistles and writings, and that the direction of Christianity was more Pauline than Jesus Christ. And so I just thought, well, that says a whole lot, that Paul's saying something right there. And of course, I'm not schooled in that to get into a deep discussion, but that's another thing that's on my list of things that made me start really questioning Christianity and my belief in the gospel. I used to love the book of Esther. And I always wondered, was it really okay with God for her to prostitute herself to the king in order to save the people? That he really didn't love her very much, or her uncle, to let her go through everything she went through and lay with the king for one night in order to save the nation. Sort of misogynistic there to me. If you guys have answers for any of these things, or if you want to chime in, please do. I'm really winging this, and I'm hoping we get somewhere. If not, I'm just talking. Why did there have to be so many excuses or reasonings for things that God commanded to be done, and nobody had an explanation? Why did people say, well, of course, the slavery issue, and we talk about that quite a bit on TANG. Why was it that so many pastors excused that or just went over it? Never touched it as an issue in the whole time that I walked in the Christian world. When I was first saved, I can remember that the Jews were looked down upon, and we were better than them because they were the ones who crucified our Lord. And so we weren't really to have anything to do with them. And that continued for many years until for me, I saw the stupidity of it all. But yeah, that was the stupidity of, if I could share anything, the 52 years of stupidity in Christianity. The things that were taught as absolutes that were absolutely not true. The freedom that came for me when I began to seek out for myself beyond the Bible. We were taught to only use the Bible. And I think that after I began to take charge of some things in my own life and started reading other books that were about the Bible and how the Bible was formed, man, did it open up a lot. I can remember back years ago when I found out that the book of Psalms was not written just by David. I mean, that was like a heart attack. We were never taught that anybody but David was the author of all those Psalms. Of course, we were never taught either that the Bible was all these different books written by all these different people, and the timeline of it, or that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John weren't really the authors of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the fact that those Gospels were written so many years after the supposed death and resurrection of Christ, and that the conversations were remembered to the letter. And I look at that now and think, holy cow, that's just crazy that I bought into that. I remember buying into some of the gifts of the Spirit, course, that was a big deal in my churches at the time. And I can look back now and see that people would be, what's the word I'm looking for? It would give them a higher ranking within themselves, if not within the church, if they could perform any of the spiritual gifts. And of course, you were super gifted if all all of them operated, or if you had one man in the church who was all encompassing in being the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher. I thought that was interesting. A question was, do I see this from a sociological perspective now? I think, Kurt, if you can specify what that topic was we were talking about. All of these points show a very human creation rather than a divine narrative. Yes, I do believe there's much that's human creation. In something that I was gonna have a show on in the future, and I'll just touch base on it because I think I can let this go for a while and talk on this for a while, is the indoctrination. And not just the indoctrination in the church, but where did even the idea of indoctrination begin? And as I was doing some studying on another area, I looked into the beginning of time in the Mesopotamia area and with the Sumerians, and how they were the first to establish a government system. And in that government system, of course, the kings and the priests were at the top, and then there were several levels of people and jobs that they did, and the bottom level on the ladder, so to speak, was that of a slave. And so however many years after that was established, that this was like a class system, and the top of the pyramid was the kings and the priests, and then the assistants and I'm going to put it this way: there's the Pope, and then the guys that come under him, and then the guys that come under him, and then the guys that come under him, and all the way down here are the people who have really no say, except that those at the top need those at the bottom so that they can live in a manner that they're like to be accustomed to. But that was a type of indoctrination, that this is the category that you fit in. You fit in the category of being a farmer or a worker, or you fit in this lower category of being a slave. And we're not told very many stories of people who went from one category to another, except that once we begin to get into the book of Genesis, and we get into the story of Moses, sweet little Moses baby, whose mama saved him, and he was just one of the Hebrews who were all slaves, and she didn't want him to be murdered, so she put him in a basket and sent him into the I started to say into the oven, might as well have sent him into the river, and lo and behold, the Pharaoh's daughter finds him and raises him in Pharaoh's household. So that is somebody who's going from being in the household of the slave to the household of the king. And what was interesting to me about that as well is that while Moses was in the household of the king, he learned everything about the system. He learned everything. He learned to read. He learned to, he learned everything that was necessary on how a kingdom was run and the order of things. Okay. So then he goes out and he kills somebody. And does he acknowledge what he did? No. He runs away from it. And then he has the joy of living 40 years away from his home and his the hierarchy of the priesthood, or not priesthood, but of the pharaohs. But remember, again, he was raised in a way that he knew all that was involved in living in the pharaoh's governmental system. So he comes back. He sees this vision of a burning bush that speaks to him. And of course, yes, he killed someone, and that's why he left. He didn't own up to his sin. He took off running. And I think that's interesting because he set a precedent and an example for leadership that came behind him in the church, because we see that still today. But anyway, I digress. He's away. He gets the call to go back and save the people. And, the whole Exodus thing, which I don't want to get into. And yes, I agree, Moses is a myth. But my point is that these are the things that were taught and continue to be taught in Christianity. So he's rescued the people. They've crossed the sea on dry land. And then he has another experience with God. And then he comes down and he sets up a religious system. And his religious system just so happens to be following the governmental system of the priests, and then the high priest, who was the only one who could go to God, and then the next level of priests who did most of the hard work, and then the down to the bottom were the people who had no connection to God but through Moses. But not personally through Moses. They had to offer a sacrifice, which went to they had to go to the priests who did the sacrifices. They didn't get to go to the high priest. So the high priest intervened supposedly for them. I've got slides and everything that I pulled together and was going to work on this as a study. So because the slides would have made it a whole lot better than just me talking about it. But the way to control the people, yes, was setting up this system that he was already familiar with, that the top dog is the one who runs the show and the people at the bottom are the ones who pay for it, basically. And that system was supposed to have been stopped when Christ came, and when he was on the cross, and the temple curtain was torn from top to bottom, separating the curtain, separating so that man had access to God and he didn't have to go through a high priest anymore. Except that when you stop and think about it, for those who I'm jumping way ahead. For those who were alive and well during the time of Christ's crucifixion, resurrection, the priests didn't like that idea of what Christ taught or what the implication was, because they would have lost their job, they would have lost their standing in the community and in the government. So guests who step in and say things about Christ that were not true, or we don't know if it was true or not. I mean, I don't believe any of it anymore, but the system was set up. The system that the Jews did not want to stop, because not only did it benefit those who were the high priest, but it also benefited the Romans. And of course, we all know how much involvement the Romans have in the canonization of the scriptures. And that's another rabbit trail I could get off, and I don't want to. You know, you guys, 52 years of all this stuff crammed in here. And I'm not lying when I say I was in the Word and in prayer and in church for 52 years. I heard this kind of stuff constantly. I studied this stuff constantly. I ate it. I drank it. I lived it. I did everything. It's just incredible to think of the stuff that I took as being gospel truth that was not. Anyway, I want to jump back again to the system that Moses started in the wilderness with the wilderness tabernacle and how that developed. And then it was not allowed once Christ came and was supposedly the one who was going to stop the sacrificial system, because he didn't, because he was the perfect sacrifice. But of course, those Pharisees and Sadducees who didn't like that idea, who didn't like the idea of losing their position and their job and all of that. And then, of course, the effect in the relationship that they had with Rome, they were pretty tight with Rome. So I believe they worked together and did a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we still haven't uncovered. And I think Paul was in on this stuff too, but that's just my opinion. I will say that we get into the writings of Paul, and Paul teaches that within the church, which is sort of his idea of the body of Christ, that there is also a hierarchy. And if I could allude to today's church, the hierarchy today is the fivefold ministry: evangelist, pastor, teacher, prophet. Apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher. And from there are the associates, and then the elders, and then the deacons, and then the house cleaners, and then the people who sit in the pews and pay the tithes, so that those at the top can live well. One of the slides that I had prepared was a slide of how beautiful the buildings are in Rome, and where the Pope lives. And that those things were built by the $5, $10, less than that, coins that were given in offerings by poor people who wanted to receive a blessing. And I can relate that to the charismatic churches that I was a part of, because I have seen with my own eyes and participated myself in, when I believed in the tithing thing, is that it was the constant, you give and God will give back to you. You know, you be willing to sacrifice and God will give back to you. I can remember begging and pleading with my ex on giving more money so that we could get what we needed back. And as those of you who heard the interview with my daughters, we lived in poverty. We raised 5 kids on very little money. I worked full time, and my ex worked part time as well as the church in order to be able to live and feed his 3 boys and my 2 girls. It was just atrocious the way we lived, but we sacrificed everything we had, time, money, blood, sweat, and tears went into the churches that we pastored, or the churches we actually started 2 churches. And so you give everything, you sometimes don't even take a salary because you want to put it back into the church, And anyway, that's a whole nother rabbit hole I could get on to. I think the thing that I appreciate more and more as my journey out of Christianity happens is that I'm no longer afraid of not pleasing God, not pleasing somebody in authority over me, not having to fit in the box and live by the rules that were ridiculous most of the time. Let me get back to my list of things that I questioned throughout especially the last 10 years. If the Bible is pro-family, why is the church not? And by that, I mean, if I look at what I was taught, that scripture, gives the idea of the husband and the wife and the children, and we're all supposed to work towards this happy family. And then you get involved with the church, and the church wants you in the building every time the doors are open, and you're sacrificing your family in order to meet the demands at the church. But the church is supposed to be having you set the example of being this great, happy family. And I know my oldest daughter mentioned that anytime we were together socially at the church, it was this big put on that, everybody was so happy and that we were just the perfect Christian family and yada, yada, yada. Well, that's with, I would say, 99% of pastors' families. That's hooey, because there's so much shit flying at home. It's crazy for everybody, not just financially, but how you raise the kids, if there's secret sins involved, and what kind of TV do you watch, and what kind of records do you listen, or records. Yeah, I'm really aging myself there. CDs and, music that you let the kids listen to or don't, or what do you participate in or not. It's just crazy. It's just a crazy mess. And the Christian family is usually gives one look in public and another at home. And somehow I don't think that was what was intended in the beginning, if the stories were true. I think that in Christianity, the idea of I'm sorry, this noise is too loud over here. I think the idea of the family is an awesome thing, but it's not practical. And we are setting such high, unrealistic standards for people that you live a certain way, that you behave a certain way, and that you don't let people be who they really are. That's just sad to me. It really is. John Christian said records are cool again. Yes, they are. And that I wish I had my record collection. And my ex used to have the 45s, the original 45s. Can you imagine, John, how much money those things would be worth now? That huge collection that he had. Yeah, there's so much that I can see that I missed out on in the 52 years that I was walking as a Christian. Lots of music. What's funny now is that as I'm deconstructing, I'm listening to the music that I would not let my kids listen to. I love Michael Jackson, and Queen, and who else was it the other day I was listening to? And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is stuff my kids would just have a hissy fit if they came into the house and heard that music blaring now. And I used to yell at them for listening to it. Just some of the silly things that we did, hurtful things. But when you look at it, it was silly. It was just wrong. But there were... In thinking of music, it made me think of a teaching that went around for a while back in the, I don't know, 2000s, early 2000s maybe. And that was the importance of having protection over your eyes and your ears. And we went into a particular Old Testament story, and I can't remember the name of the book. Anyway, it's about rebuilding the temple. Ezra, I think it was Ezra and Nehemiah, and where they had to post guards at the different gates. And so out of that came a teaching that we needed to post guards over our eye gate and our ear gate and our mouth gate, and there was something else for the body. And so the way that you did that is that you're basically living in a box, but you're not listening to anything that's worldly or secular. You're not watching anything that's worldly or secular. You're not participating in anything that's worldly or secular. So, of course, you're totally isolated from the world, but yet you're supposed to go out into the world and preach the gospel. And I always thought that was kind of ridiculous to separate yourself so much from the world, and yet you're looking to be winsome to them. And being winsome to them is not going to happen to anybody out in the world to see how awful it was to live in this box. And now I understand it. I mean, now I just am so grateful and thankful to be out of that crazy box that I was in for so long. Prayer was another big deal in my deconversion. And that was watching carefully all of the unanswered prayers over the years. Particularly prayers of healing. I remember many, many times of having prayer vigils and prayer meetings and all that kind of stuff that we were told if we did this, if we fasted if we forsook ourselves in order to get before the throne of God and ask boldly in the name of Christ that these things would be done for us. And we would pray and intercede for people for healing. And it was interesting to me that the healings that were professed were usually simple things that happened within a church setting. Headaches, backaches. There were times when we were told that people were healed from cancer, but that always involved the interaction with medication. So it was never a miraculous healing. I never saw a miraculous healing. Listening to an interview one time with Benny Hinn's nephew, he was questioning his father, who had worked with Benny Hinn for quite a number of years, 30 years. And Kazi, the nephew, was spilling the beans, basically. And he asked his dad, he said, "Dad, how many of these conferences have you done with Uncle Benny?" And he said, "About 3,000. And he said, "Okay, out of all these, how many people have you seen that were really honestly healed?" And he said, "One." And that's pathetic, but true. If people really have the gift of healing, they should be able to go into the hospitals and take care of a lot of business and put these hospitals and insurance companies out of business. Probably the most recent thing with healing was what we went through with my sister, and the years and years and years of prayers for healing, and nothing ever happened. And she just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then the vigils after, she was found unresponsive, and all the craziness that went on there. And of course, she served in music ministry for many, many, many years. I mean, 20, 25 years altogether, I think. And that never happened. And that was just the final thing for me in the unloading of everything with Christianity was I knew I was absolutely done with the last thing we went through with my sister. There's a lot of teaching that I've had over the years that, oh gosh, I could make lists and we could have days and days where I would be more prepared than I am tonight to share with you some of the junk. I have had the opportunity to live in 7 different states. Of course, being involved in churches in every different state, starting a church in Georgia, starting churches in Indiana. And basically, if it's a big church or a little church, they're all the same. It's all the same BS. I don't, I'll spill this and then we're running into just 9 minutes left. And I love you guys for sticking with me, because I'm just like, oh, what am I going to do? But here we go. We experienced a lot of unique things in traveling and seeing the different types of ministry going on. The main point, just I have a train on a track, and sometimes my train jumps my track and I forget where I was going, but it'll come back to me. There's just so much in Christianity that is just so wrong and so silly and so hurtful. And that's the biggest thing for me. And my passion, I think finally at my age, I have finally found my calling or my passion. And that is to try to help other people to see the reality of what is really going on and the falsehood of religion, not just Christianity, but religion in general. And that as we learn more and more, we're willing to come outside of the box of what we've always been told is safe and really explore, use the mind that we have to begin to explore what's out there. What is it about this book? And that was the first thing that I did, was I went into the book of Genesis and I got information about what was said in the Torah. And I compared the two, because we were always told that what's in the Torah is exactly the same thing in our Old Testament, and that is not true. And I thought, if I was lied to about that, what else was I lied to about? And that really opened the doors of my deconstruction process. I will tell you that deconstructing has been very, very hard for me, with as many years active in ministry and in Christianity. Of the 52 years, 35 were active in ministry of some sort. So the amount of indoctrination that has been in my life has been very, very difficult to search through. Excuse me. And I have made a decision to participate in a workshop that is for those who are going through deconstruction. And where is it? I had to write everything down. It's a workshop called Divorcing Religion. And Janice Selby, who is a licensed therapist who works very closely with Dr. Marlene Winnell. It's a really in-depth workshop, and it's a small group thing to go through together. And with both of those women being psychologists, Dr. Winnell is the one who first started recognized and termed religious trauma. Dr. Winnell has been on Seth Andrews and a couple other YouTube channels. But I'm going to participate in that because this is a lot for me to unpack. And I have read more books in the last year and I'm an avid reader, and I have listened to podcasts and YouTube, and I mean, so much that it's been overwhelming to me. And I did a bad thing, and that is trying to cram into 1 year a way of undoing 52 years, and it's not possible. And it just made me very stressed, very, very stressed out. So hopefully next week, Sunny's going to continue the topic that we started last week to finish out the broadcast on child abuse. I will tell you that broadcast last week really triggered a lot, because that was my life. And even though I've been in therapy for many, many years, the day after my time with Sunny last week, I spent the day in bed. I couldn't function. And it was the memories and you just don't know unless you've been there. And I'm so much better, because years ago I would have been in bed forever. From triggers and the trauma, reliving that kind of trauma. But seeing as how that I have also experienced spiritual and religious trauma, and, sort of, yeah. I just have found, honestly, guys, Oz and I have always tried to be transparent, and that's the way we feel that we grow and we help other people grow. So I'm being transparent again, that number one, just getting stuff ready to do a broadcast is a lot of work, and trying to schedule out people to do shows schedule out a future so you're staying busy. And then I'm probably older than most of you, could probably be your mother or grandmother. So my age does have a little bit of a bearing on the wear and tear. I'm also a part of another broadcast with Unordained, and it's a group of former ministers. And we've come together to share as much as we can to help people get out of the bondages that are there with religion. Also, in my zeal and drive to learn as much as possible, I love Dr. Josh's books. I love getting into that kind of stuff. But I just got to where I was just so stressed out, and am stressed, that I wasn't doing anything fun. That I was just reading and listening and writing, and reading and listening and writing things that I've been learning in the last year. And I've not been doing anything that's relaxing for me. One of the things I love to do is write short stories. And I have a character named Mr. Dobbs. It's sort of a kid's story. And Mr. Dobbs is this amazing squirrel. And I'm afraid Mr. Dobbs hasn't had any amazing adventures lately because I've neglected him. And the other favorite thing of mine to do since I was a little girl is sewing. And now my sewing machine is collecting dust. And I've seen that I've gotten things out of balance, and that I need help to overcome and get back in balance. I've made some unwise decisions during this time too, and just pushing myself too much. So after Sonny and I do the next part 2 of the childhood trauma, I'm going to take a break. And in that break time, I'm going to focus on the divorcing religion, and working with this group to really get a grasp on the healing that I need in my mind, in learning to let go more and more of the religious trauma and of the things that kept me so bound, and then come back in full after the first of the year with some new stuff, and re-energized, and probably some new programming ideas. And I just thank you guys for being so faithful and so positive with me here. I never thought Grandma would have a YouTube thing go on, but I love it. I'm passionate about it. I'm learning more. And I want to do the best that I can do, and help everybody as much as possible, and be a mama and a grandma to whoever needs it, and most of all, to be a friend. So what I want to leave you with is, please stay tuned, because we will have one more show with Sonny. And then I could be a real smart ass and say, keep me in your prayers, but I won't do that to you. Just know that I'm working on getting me stronger and better again. And then I'll be back in January with some new stuff. And I just want to share some fun things too. I don't like being bogged down with all this serious stuff all the time. And I think there's more to life than just religion and anti-religion and anti-theism and all of that kind of stuff. We've got to start learning to live our lives to the fullest. And so I just want to encourage you to continue to be kind and to continue to have great adventures and keep exploring. Love y'all. Bye-bye.